Oren, my man, we're back in the dog days of the NBA offseason. How you doing, my man?
I'm doing good. Back to work. So I guess that's a good thing. How about you? Are you still
Yeah,
on the
I'm.
islands?
I'm.
Or are you
No,
back?
I'm in Vancouver now. I'm hopping around. It's hot here. It's very hot, which is nice. Um, but more importantly, the NBA season schedule has been released. The 2022-2023 season. So we thought we'd take the opportunity to talk it. Yeah, have a little
We're
celebration because
having a
you know
party.
what? There is cause for a little bit of celebration with the schedule, and we'll get into why shortly. But to start us off, what were your general thoughts with the schedule release?
Yeah, I mean, I've never done a schedule pod before
Yeah,
or schedule
we're
video.
desperate for content. Who are we
So
kidding?
we are desperate for content. We've kind of committed to trying to be consistent here over the next hopefully up until training camp because there's not a whole lot of content out there and we're for the people. Our last video did good, so we want to keep it going. But honestly, schedule talk is there's worse topics we've potted about. Like
Oh yeah,
I think there are some interesting things, or at least like it's pretty easy to get excited looking at the schedule. And yeah, there's certain things that I find interesting. There's certain things I like, certain things I don't like. So let's get into it. Yeah, I mean, I want to start with the opener, which is against Cleveland. I find that interesting that
mm,
the NBA is pushing the Scottie versus Mobley agenda. I'm not sure they would have if Toronto and if it didn't happen that those were the 3-4 picks, right?
yeah.
Because like those two players have no like connection.
That,
Like they don't beef, you know what I mean? Like
no,
there's no
and
connection. I
Mobley's
think it's
this like
only just because there was
soft-spoken.
rumors that the Raptors wanted Mobley
Mm,
and then they got the pick after them and they got Barnes and but like they're different players. They don't have any like history or connection, so I don't really understand it that much. Do
no, I
you?
mean Mobley's like this soft-spoken, quiet dude.
Right.
Like I don't know. I'd feel bad if there was any sort of like you know physical rivalry between him and Barnes. I do think that Cleveland and Toronto are on similar trajectories, and they do
Yeah.
have these like potential generational players in the exact same draft year. So they are like um, they are connected in that way, and so it is smart of the league to nurture that, especially they're smaller markets. I mean, I don't think we're that small, but the NBA considers us a smaller market. And you see across the schedule, like there's a concerted effort for all the teams to kind of bring to like there's more purpose in this schedule than there have been in the past where they're trying to like coax out these rivalries or like at least there's these kind of reasons to tune in for a specific game. So it makes a lot of sense to me on that front. But I mean, I was on the Confederacy of Dunks podcast yesterday, and they asked me like, what other rivalries do the Raptors have? And it's like, I think they're all going to come from Scottie because nobody else really has any.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a good topic we could actually get into though.
yeah. I mean,
But yeah, you're right. Just thinking about it, because I was gonna say, why isn't like Cade versus Scottie a rivalry? Like, pick any of them,
right.
or even Jalen Green. I know Scottie and Jalen Green have a relationship, but yeah, what you said about Cleveland is interesting. Like, maybe they're trying to go back to that Cleveland Toronto LeBronto rivalry
Mm,
because those teams have a history at least. So if you're maybe it's that. Obviously, like they finished 1-2 in Rookie of the Year, but I don't. But this started before that even happened. So like the Mobley versus Scottie thing. So and maybe it's like yeah, same trajectories. These teams have a history. Um,
they could be like the 4-5. They could be the 7-8. Like, I think there's gonna, depending on health and stuff. I think the two teams are going to be intrinsically tied down across the season this year and potentially the future.
yeah, can we talk about the rivalry thing though? Because did you see that Golden State is the Raptors rival for the rivalries
Yeah,
week? So the NBA
feels
is doing a new thing called Rivalries Week in January this year, and the Raptors rival is the Golden State Warriors. How do you feel about that, and who do you think it should have been?
Well, it's definitely not Golden State. Let's be clear on that.
Yeah.
From Golden State's perspective, it's how is it not Memphis?
No, I think they have multiple games. Golden State does.
Oh, in
But
this
we don't.
rivalry
We
week?
only have
Oh,
we
I
only
see.
have one.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's Philly. And,
Yeah.
like now we got two Cameroonians versus one. Like, Philly fans, I mean, if you pay attention to Toronto Raptor Philly 76er Twitter, which you probably shouldn't, but if you did pay attention, like, there's a lot of vitriol between the two fan bases. There's a growing discontent between, like, I think Embiid and the Raptors generally, possibly between Pascal and Embiid. Like there's beef there. OG got into it with Embiid in the playoffs. Embiid did his stupid taunting stuff. Like, I think there's a lot to build on um, with Philly and Toronto, and they play each other back to back in the first like week or two of the season. So you could follow up that into the rivalry week, and I think that'd be a good matchup.
Yeah. The other one I would think of is Boston. Like that was almost a rivalry when the Celtics beat them in the bubble, and then the next year we had a Christmas game against them. I think if my math is
Mm-hmm.
right. No, maybe that was the same year actually. Um, but then the Raptors fell off after that, and Boston got better. So right now, I get the NBA looking at it and being like, those teams aren't on the same trajectory. But I think like sooner than later, that will be a rivalry again. And then the niche one is like the Detroit Pistons. I would have liked to see a
Yeah.
rivalry game with the
They
Detroit
could title
Pistons.
it that. I actually have that highlighted for later, but like the Casey Curse game, like, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The Warriors are not a rivalry at all. I think the Warriors and the Raptors are like really similar franchises in a lot of ways. They target a lot of the same players
Mm.
and they go about things very similarly, but like that's like the opposite of a rivalry.
Yeah, I think there's a
Like
mutual
they
respect
respect the
too.
yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
Yeah.
They respect each other too much to be
I know. It's
rivalries.
just like doesn't make sense. Like they're gonna hug Otto Porter Jr. when they see him. It's like, how am I excited for that in rivalry week?
Yeah.
Um, I
Anyways, what should we get to next?
Well, general reaction for me, a couple things. One, they have 7 games in 12 days to start the season, and this could be like the first time you see Toronto fans push the panic button and say like, "I told you this team's not as good as we think it is because they play Cleveland, then Brooklyn, we don't know, Miami twice, Philly twice, and then Atlanta." Like we could easily go 2-5 in that set of games, and then all of a sudden, we're in this hole and we're kind of worried and who's going to be scoring for us, blah blah blah. So um, that will be kind of an interesting thing to watch for. Conversely, if we go 5-2,
Yeah.
things could be looking up for the start of the year. A couple of divisional wins there, and then another thing that stood out to me was at the end of the season, you've got Miami. 5 of the 7 are on the road. You have Miami, Philly, Charlotte twice, Boston twice, Milwaukee. There's a lot of like playoff like consideration in that stretch. So those could be really big games, or it could be nothing games depending on how everything shakes out. But those kind of stood out to me at first glance.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Raptors schedule gets tough at the end, I think partly because of that stretch and that away stretch, but Boston could totally be resting their players by then. Milwaukee probably will be the last day of the season, so it's really hard to say. The beginning of the season is definitely interesting though because we're seeing, like we talked about this last time, we're seeing all the Raptors playing together all summer, and I'm curious to see if that'll like matter if if it transitions quickly to the season and where they have chemistry, and where other teams it's going to obviously take some time, just like it did for the Raptors last season to
Mhm.
gel. Like a Brooklyn, for example, for sure. Even Philly is incorporating some new pieces. Honestly, now that I'm looking at it, those teams they play in the first few weeks are like bringing back very similar groups to last year, though. But yeah, Toronto's also bringing back a really similar group, and they have the advantage of playing together all summer. So I'll be curious to see if like they can use that as an advantage and get off to a quick start.
Yeah, shout out to Rico Hines for basically us getting reps in as a team early on. Um, Something that I do love this home and home. Do you want to talk about the home and home thing going on? Because that's
Yeah, let's do
really
it.
great. The NBA has clearly made a concerted effort to. Are you hearing the song in the background? Is this
Yeah, but it's okay.
okay? I'll I'll keep going. I'll talk over it.
Yeah.
The NBA has made a really concerted effort to. I don't know what exactly their motivation is. It's certainly environmentally friendly. It's conducive to player travel wear and tear, and it also it creates a little bit of this rivalry thing that we've been talking about. A little bit of a competitive edge. Um, so that's cool to see. Toronto has 8 of these across the season, and I think that's like a fun thing to if you're an average fan or like you don't know a lot about basketball or something, it's kind of cool to see a team and their schematics, and then the next night or two see it again. And I think you can start to see like patterns and similarities or whatever else, and you see that in the playoffs. But by the time that happens, the season's already over. So I think this is a really cool idea from the league.
Yeah, I think their intentions is like I think the NBA, or at least what it should be doing, is anything possible to get like stars to play important games. And
Mm.
as we've seen, like stars have begun just sitting out back to backs pretty regularly, especially if they have even like a minor lingering injury. And until the league cuts down the schedule from 82 games to like really incentivize guys playing every day, they've been trying to do things like less back-to-backs, less 3 and 4 days, or 3 and 5 days. And this year, yeah, they've done this home and home or 2-game back-to-back in the same place. And so I think the idea is just to incentivize stars to actually like play back-to-backs in some cases, and like you don't have to worry about the travel. You don't really have as good as of an excuse as if it was
Mm.
like a home and home to take one of those days off. Like stars all the time, if it's like a home and home, for example, will play the home game and then stay while the team goes
Right.
for that road trip, that mini road trip. But like hopefully this incentivizes stars to play, because like that's been a huge issue for me as a fan watching the league in the past few years, is just you never know what you're going to get. And like we always do this thing with Christmas games, and it's like, oh, they got snubbed. Oh, I'm so excited for this game. And then we get to Christmas and there's always like an injury or two. And it's always like, oh, the game I was looking forward to like sucks now. Like the year the Raptors got a Christmas game, it sucked. Everyone was injured. And so they have to do something about figuring that out, and just getting guys to play more consistently, especially in the big games. And so hopefully this reduced travel does that a little bit.
It's nice to see that the league's taking making a concerted effort to like I don't know like have goals essentially in the schedule, because it feels like in the past that it's just random. Like
Right.
last year, the Raptors had 7 away games that were sandwiched by home games. Now, this just
Yeah.
makes no sense. Like I remember, we all remember the what was it, the Philly Chicago travel where OG was stuck in a hotel or I don't know something like that. And this year there's only 3. So I don't know if that's league wide where they've done that, but and win like score one for climate change in the process, not having all of these like flights everywhere,
Mhm.
but it also just didn't make any sense. And so it's about time that the league has looked at the schedule and thought, okay, from February to April, fans get bored, players get bored. There's probably more injury in that span of time. What can we do to spice things up? And also, like you were saying, encourage players to play without endangering themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Moving on. Um, you want to talk about big games?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Big games, big stretches. Um, I don't know. Do you want me to start or do you want to start?
Okay, I'll start. Okay, we got no. Well, actually, you go ahead.
We already talked about the first stretch of games. That's definitely big just because a lot of division conference rivals, really good teams, and the start of the season is the most consistent where everyone's playing and there's no injuries. So like I think it'll be really exciting to watch them how they stack up against Miami and Philadelphia and Atlanta, who I think will be in the playoff mix. So the start of the season sticks out for sure as a stretch of games. And then obviously from I'll scroll down here. January, late January, they go on this huge West Coast road trip, January 25th to February 5th. Last year they had 2 West Coast road trips. Each was like a week. This year they have like a 10-day just get it all out of the West Coast. They have another, yeah, that's really the big one. So the West Coast is always like a good those road trips are obviously always like big just because they're difficult and you don't want to lose a bunch of games. But the West Coast, I've always liked looking at like a team in the Eastern Conference's record versus the West Coast because it's a pretty good. Usually, it tends to be like a good measure of how good a team is because the West has historically been pretty stacked, and I think this year the West will be stacked. So, looking at how they fare against Western Conference teams at that point in the season when they're obviously going to be like the full version of themselves for the Raptors. Yeah, I'll be curious to just see how they can stack up against the West. So those are the ones that stick out for me in
Yeah,
terms
so
of stretches.
that West Coast swing is Sacramento, Golden State, Portland, Phoenix, Utah, Houston, Memphis. The only other big quote unquote big West Coast swing is Denver, LA.
Yeah.
And yeah, I like you're right. The West is more competitive this year. Utah should be a breeze, but even Houston and Sacramento are going to be tough outs. Portland's going to be a lot better this year. So yeah, you're right. It's a good bellwether for where the team is at um, in the league at large. A stretch that stands out to me is like I remember last year, late December, early January was kind of when Toronto turned their season around, and everybody was kind of healthy. But I'm kind of curious of like when that'll happen again, and I think it'll happen earlier this year, assuming everybody's healthy, where we're going to kind of see if this Toronto team is really means business. And so there's a stretch where they go Miami, Atlanta, Brooklyn, Dallas, Cleveland, New Orleans, Brooklyn. Like those are all teams that are in Toronto's tier or a little bit above. And so like, if we come out of those 2 weeks with a plus record, I I feel like it's going to put the Raptors on somewhat of a trajectory towards the season that I think a lot of us anticipate them having.
Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, just for me looking at the schedule, I think Philly is going to be fun to play them 2 times in the first couple weeks because of what just happened in the playoffs. And the Raptors have not done anything to change the Joel Embiid problem.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I think they figured some stuff out as that series went along, and I'll be just curious to see how they match up against him because if you don't do anything by the deadline and they get that matchup again in the playoffs, like even if you're maybe the better team, that could be a really bad matchup for them. So those 2 games will be big, and then Boston December 5th is the first time they play Boston. That'll also just be an exciting game. I think every time they play Boston, it's exciting. And then they play Milwaukee for their first nationally televised game on January 4th. So
Just
those
takes
are a
3 months
few.
for that to happen.
Yeah, those are a few others that stick out. But
We
yeah.
got we got Orlando 3 times in 11 days, so we're gonna
Oh,
go
I
one and
heard.
two there for sure.
Right. That's rough. That's rough. Oh, we should definitely predict their record at the end. But
Okay,
anyways,
we'll do
should we
that.
move on to
Yeah,
tickets to buy?
yeah. Okay, so I thought of this topic because I find that a lot of my friends are like, I want to get tickets or I want to get tickets for my parents or whatever. What games should I buy? So I kind of or what game should I go to? So I kind of put together a little bit of criteria and some games. Oren, I don't know if you did or not, but you can follow suit.
No, you go first, and then I'll pick a couple.
Okay, so when I'm looking at games, I want it to be on a Friday or a Sunday because I either want to go out afterwards on the Friday or Sunday. It's like something to look forward to when you got like the Sunday scaries, right? But only Sunday after the football season, so that's important. I want it to be winter because when it's nice out, I want to be outside. I want it to be cheap, so I don't want to go to these inflated games like the Warriors and the Lakers. Yeah. So I'm avoiding those, although there is an exception to the Lakers that I'll get to. Or the exception to the Lakers would be that I want to see Scottie pester LeBron more. Like that has very high entertainment value. And then obviously I want it to be exciting and competitive. So that with all of that considered, these are the games that I would suggest you look for tickets to. So December 30th, Phoenix comes back to town. That'll be the first time they've met in Toronto since the Raptor Devin Booker I don't know what you want to call it, kerfuffle occurred, where Devin Booker was shooting a free throw and the Raptor distracted him in the empty arena, and Devin Booker had him shooed away by security, which is, classic petulant Devin Booker. Don't get me started on that. So that'd be fun because you never know what's going to happen there. October 28th, Joel Embiid's in town with Philly. I think that's just like an awesome, like I said earlier, rivalry. So that's also on a Friday. Both those games are on Fridays, so boom. The exception to this rule is October 31st is Halloween. So we're playing Atlanta on a Monday. I like dressing up, so going to a game in a costume makes a lot of sense to me. Dallas is November 26th. You get to watch Luka. This is like a superstar in his prime. It's must-see basketball. That's on a Saturday, so you might, that's not bad. Same thing goes for Portland, January 8th. Dame's in town. I think this might be one of the last times to see Dame at his peak of powers. Also, it's January, so there's New Year's resolutions on budgeting. So I don't think people are going to be spending as much money at this point in time. So it might be easier to grab a ticket. February 12th is Detroit. Chance to break the Casey curse. That's on a Sunday. March 24th, also another chance to break the Casey curse against Detroit. That's on a Friday. And both are, Detroit's a very fun, lively team. Cade Cunningham, like you said, and Barnes could have a rivalry. So those are worth going to. The final two is Charlotte on April 2nd. There's playoff implications potentially. It's on a Sunday. You can see LaMelo.
That's at Charlotte.
Oh, is that at Charlotte?
Sorry, but yeah, they definitely
scratch
play
that.
Charlotte.
Fly to Charlotte, cheap flight, cheap tickets, good barbecue, no problem. And then
we play Charlotte here, January 10th and 12th at home.
Okay, so I think seeing LaMelo play is fun. I don't think Charlotte's going to be that good this year, but he is he's a showstopper in and of himself. So I think it's worth it. And then I would say the other Friday is Boston, April 7th. There could be a playoff implication. So it could be worth going for, but that's kind of high risk, high reward.
No, that's at Boston. I hate to
that's at Boston too? God damn it. Okay, ignore those two. But you got lots of games to choose from, so.
Yeah. Okay, I'll go through a few. My criteria is simpler. The cheapness is definitely a factor because Raptors tickets escalate so much against teams like the Lakers and Golden State and even like Philadelphia and Boston. Those tickets are really expensive. You can get really reasonable tickets against some of the lesser known teams. And I would just look, I'm going to say some that like the casual fan maybe doesn't know about, but could get a lot out of because, I think there's just a lot of like undercovered star players that are really, really entertaining to watch in person. And maybe they won't be so cheap for so long in certain cases. And I guess these are also guys who I've really enjoyed watching in the past. I think some people would say Atlanta and Trae Young. I'm not like the biggest I'm not like the biggest heliocentric offense guy. You know what I mean? Like I really prefer teams that move the ball on top of having that superstar player. But Trae is definitely a draw regardless.
You don't want to see the new DeJounte, like the new persona that he's created for himself?
Yeah, you know what? that is a good game because I want to see how those two look together. I totally forgot that they made that trade. But for me, the bigger ones are like, let's just go down here. When do they play? Like, this is okay, Milwaukee. Seeing Giannis in person for me is like at the top of my list still, because I think last year both times they came to Toronto, he didn't come. But Giannis is a must see in person. That's an expensive game though. Another one is, I'm trying to find it, but when do the Oklahoma City Thunder come to town? Because Shai is an incredible player to watch in person. Just the way he manipulates defenses. And at times it'll be like the Raptors are sending 3 guys at him and it doesn't matter. So if you can get to an OKC game in Toronto, and I think they're going to be pretty competitive this year,
I would
definitely recommend that.
I would love to be courtside to see a lineup with Poku, Usman Dieng, Chet Holmgren, and I don't know who else is 7 feet and super long on that team. But I think like I've only sat near courtside once, and to see the physical specimens of NBA players at that level is actually something else. And these guys are truly unicorn bodies. I think it would be worth to pay a little bit more to see. Oklahoma's going to be as cheap as it gets, basically. So you could pay a little bit more, get a good seat, and see those massive bodies.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's like the same thing with Giannis to me. Is like why I want to see Giannis in person, just the way he dominates. And I'll say another guy. Okay, so it's actually right back to back. If you're ready to go for 2 games, OKC comes on March 16th, so I'd recommend that. Jokic is a similar guy who like literally looked like a dad amongst boys playing the Raptors last season, and it was so entertaining to watch. Like he's just so much bigger than him, and he was just like batting the ball off the backboard to himself. But obviously a really entertaining player. So Denver on March 14th, I think would be another good one.
Jokic is
Indiana,
Jokic is
yep,
another guy that Barnes annoyed too. So that's also something to keep an eye on. I'm
true.
here for anything that like where Barnes is going to piss people off and create some kind of like disturbance.
Fair, yeah. And then I mean, no, Indiana's bad. New Orleans would be another one. I don't think it'll be too expensive. February 23rd. I think seeing Zion in person is another physical marvel that just like, how does he jump like that? How does he move that quickly? Lou Dort is another guy who, if you go see OKC, similarly, like he's too big to move the way he does, but Zion's obviously that on another level. So I think New Orleans, like that's a guy I've never seen in person, Zion, and I'd really like to. So yeah, those are a few. Oh, and the Grizzlies are another team that like Ja Morant, obviously, but that whole team is just really fun. A couple of Canadians on it. That'd be a fun watch.
Yeah, I'm also here for all fire hydrant guys, as Samson calls them. So Dort and Zion fit right into that mold.
Right. The
No, those
team
are
I would
good.
not go pay to watch, Washington, Indiana. Um, Honestly, the Lakers would not, unless you want to see LeBron. But other than that, they would not be worth the money you'd have to pay. Sacramento, Portland.
I don't really
Uh,
want to watch Miami. Like I love
yeah,
Lowry, but
fair.
it's just kind of like heartbreaking to see him on a different team. He probably won't play, and yeah, I'm kind of over Miami.
Yeah, and it's an expensive ticket because of Lowry.
True.
But yeah, that's about it for me.
Okay. Do we want to talk data and then get on out of here?
Yeah, we can show. I want to talk nationally televised, but let's show a
Okay.
couple graphs. Why not?
Yeah. Why don't we show some graphs? So for anybody listening, apologies. Are you gonna pull those up, or do you want me to?
I got one here. We can start with.
So these
I
are
thought this was
all.
actually interesting before the graphs. Let me just get my screen going. So this is like prime time in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa on Saturdays and Sundays. And the Raptors have quite a few games here. And I was happy to see that, as they should. Like, it's probably the most international team in the league. A bunch of Africans on it. few Europeans. So it makes sense to me that they would. But yeah, like we'll talk. I guess we might as well just talk about nationally televised games right after this. But yeah, they got a good amount of primetime games here, um, which was nice to see. But they only got 4 nationally televised games. I'll I'll go back to the schedule. And do you want to give your thoughts on this first?
I do, because I think, and I ranted about this yesterday on the Christmas games. It's the same concept. I think like the NBA as an organization is so myopic in how they consider like big market teams. It's not about highlighting like the Lakers or really the Warriors for that matter. I saw a stat like 50% of their games are like national TV or something. It's about finding the fledgling markets, right? And Africa being probably one of the major ones. And that's like, I don't care that the Raptors aren't on the Christmas Day schedule. But if you want to start building your fan base and not worrying about cable, because cable's like, I know there's a lot of money in cable, but that's not how everybody watches it. They should be thinking about, profiling guys like Siakam, uh, like Precious to some degree, and Giannis and Embiid too. I'm sure they get a lot of attention, but I think like they need to be more open minded about, and Europe, about who they're catering to and how they're profiling their players. I think they're too stuck in their old school like 1995 ways.
Yeah,
Can't rant
are you
for that.
saying like for Americans, people who are living in America who are like African American, or are you saying like people who are just watching these games on like League Pass or whatever from
No,
other
I'm saying
countries?
that like they base like they're concerned about quote unquote big markets in the NBA, right? So the New York Knicks are on Christmas Day,
Mhm,
the Lakers, two teams who really haven't warranted it, although LeBron himself probably warrants it. But
mhm.
and as opposed to thinking about a that nobody in my generation watches the games on cable, or few do, like not a lot do, let's say there's less, so that's like
Mhm.
something to consider when you're thinking about demographics and numbers. But b that like the New York Knicks fans are going to watch the New York Knicks fans whenever they play. Like I think they should be thinking more broadly about how are they going to attract more viewers. There's a whole country north of them that wants to see Toronto succeed. Like they should put Toronto on Christmas Day. They should put them in more national games to give them like a better chance to create a larger audience. And similarly with African descent players, I'm talking about, like they have the players from Africa are burgeoning right now, right? Like we're getting more and more all the time, and I think that's a huge market for the NBA to go to for to market. So yeah, that's what I was getting at, and I think like a team like Toronto really kind of strikes that chord.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. I thought you were gonna say that you like the Raptors only getting 4
No,
nationally televised games
no.
because it fuels the underdog mentality.
Well, I mean, I personally like it. I like
Yeah.
that they like that. Still, no one really appreciates who Toronto is, but I think it's a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah, my criticism is on the same lines, but, like, a bit different. I just think, like, as a NBA fan, I am tired of watching the Lakers and the Suns and these teams that they put on night after night that just in a lot of like, ways aren't that entertaining in the way they play. Like, I'm not focusing on the superstars that they should be, like, marketing their game around because that's a whole whole 'nother issue, and that is a Christmas Day thing, but more so, like, with the nationally televised games, just, like, they should be trying to make the best possible matchups, po and, like, the games where the guys are gonna play the hardest and where it's gonna be close and competitive until the end. And as a fan of the Raptors, I'm biased because I know the Raptors really well, but I think a lot of teams could have a similar complaint though to the one I have, which is just, like, the Raptors are a compelling product, and, like, every year, they're extremely entertaining, and they overachieve, and you know that they're gonna be competitive pretty much every night. And I just wanna see more teams that are interesting and different and built differently, like the Raptors are. play on national TV. Like OKC, they got 0 nationally televised games. They have a superstar in Shy, and they're a really interesting young team. I think there's a lot of examples of like teams that maybe aren't even that good, but are just like better than the NBA is acting like they are, with like only 4 nationally televised games, and like more importantly, like an entertaining product. I think that's how it should be ranked, rather than like superstar player slash marquee franchise, which is how it's currently ranked. I think it should be like, is this team entertaining to watch? Because if you want the most people as possible to watch your product till the end, that's what you should be putting on. Because I'll turn on all the time a Lakers game late at night, and I'll just be like, oh, they're getting creamed by 20. I'm turning this off at half, and I'm gonna watch something else. And like, if you're talking about ratings, you don't want people tuning out at half. And I feel like that's often, and the Knicks are gonna play a bunch of these games, and they're gonna get wiped like by Milwaukee. And I think it's also, lastly, it's a little ridiculous they don't have a single nationally televised game against the Sixers, who they just played in the playoffs and lost to in a really like interesting series. Um, like they're trying to make a Kawhi thing happen against the Clippers. It's like, give me the Sixers. That's a way more interesting storyline.
Yeah, 100%. And like no one outside of New York wants to watch the Knicks also. But I think, and this might be too conceptual, but I read a book on like innovation with organizations. And it's like the ones that go obsolete are the ones that are like anchored to their customer base, right? They keep producing the same thing because that's where the bread and butter is. But
Right.
they, as a result, they don't innovate, right? They don't find new products. And this is the same thing. Like if you keep banking on LeBron, you keep banking on KD, and like the odds of them being injured are like almost a coin flip now. So then you're really kind of, if they're out, then you don't even want to watch the game at all. So to your point, if you're investing in your future a little bit and trying to give a platform to guys like SGA and Zion and whoever else, you know, that's gonna be better for the product of the game and for viewership and for the and future generations who I think are kind of losing interest a little bit in the game.
I don't know. I think young generations basketball is like doing pretty well.
Yeah, but I think it's the way they consume it. Like I'm starting to lose my
Social
attention span
media.
to these games. Like
Right. They don't watch the whole game anymore.
Yeah,
They watch like highlights and
yeah.
stuff.
I mean, it just
Yeah.
takes too long, and again, like there's a part of the season that's just boring.
Yeah. We should do a pod on refereeing, because I think the big reason it takes too long is the refereeing. But anyways, should
Okay,
we move
data.
on?
Yeah, pull up a couple of charts. I think this is
Yeah.
Ed Kupfer mostly that we're going to.
Yeah.
This guy has done some really cool shit. And so shout out to Ed for doing this. We're going to use your charts to talk about things like, what do we got here? This is strength of schedule.
Yeah. Throughout the course of the season.
So the Raptors have the 6, 7, 8, 11th easiest schedule. Is that right? Which,
Oh, that's a different chart. That's no, that's
no, you
wrong.
had it.
Yeah.
So that's good. But I mean, strength schedule is pretty relative because there's going to be teams that are better than they're predicted to be and worse, or injury. So that only goes so far. But I think that bodes well for Toronto generally. Do you have any thoughts on strength of schedule?
Strength of schedule.
I don't.
Is it?
I don't
I
really
think
take
there
it
was
that
another.
seriously.
Wasn't there another graph that says, where does it say that they have the 11th ranked
Well, I
strength of
just
schedule?
counted. The top left is the easiest.
Oh, really?
Am I wrong?
Oh, okay. I don't know. I was just looking at this graph that like the season gets a little easier as it goes, which is kind of surprising because of the way it ends is pretty tough. Shouldn't there be like a little up at the
Upswing.
end? But I guess like you don't want to be playing bad teams at the end of the season because you want to be gearing up for the playoffs. So in that regard, I guess like Orlando's schedule, I think like that's kind of a little more ideal in certain ways, just because like you're gearing up for the playoffs. But hey, I'm not here to complain. I don't really care.
I don't know. They're pretty much in the middle, which is fine to me. To me, it's more like the yeah. Well, we'll get to it. Okay, go ahead.
This is when you're more rested than your opponents. Toronto's right up at the top, seventh game, most amount of games where they're going to be more rested than their opponents, which I think in this league is hugely important now.
Yeah.
Like, especially a lot of those will be back-to-backs in for the other team, and that just means now like your star player might not play. So
yeah, and I don't know what the stats were last year, but it felt like there were a lot where Toronto was the disadvantaged team when it came to rest. So I feel like this is a big win for us.
I felt like that way for most of the season, and then when they started to win a ton of games at the end of the season, I felt like part of it was because other teams were less rested and they were resting guys, or guys weren't coming to Canada. And
That's a good point.
I'll get into that when I predict their record, but yeah, I think that eased up as the season went on for them.
Blake Murphy summed it up. The Raptors have the third most rest advantage games, so that means they're better rested than the other team. The third fewest rest disadvantage games. And
they're tied for the third most. You can see in this graph.
And tied for fewest back-to-backs and second fewest miles traveled. So
yeah, this is back-to-backs right here.
Generally speaking, like this schedule as far as travel and rest and all of that goes is hugely in favor of Toronto.
I think so, especially compared to last year. Yeah, if you just look at it at first glance, like they definitely got a more, as they should. Adam Silver is supposed to be Masai's friend. Like, I don't know why we're not getting preferential treatment every year, honestly. But that's beside the point. Those are all the graphs I have. Do you have any more?
I mean, Ed has a ton. I suggest you go to his Twitter page. It's at Ed Coop for KUPFER. It's pretty cool. We won't go on about them, but there's a bunch there. That's all I had to say about schedule. I think squeezed juice out of a pretty dry topic. Sure. So I feel pretty good about it.
I just want to predict their record.
Oh, okay.
Let's each predict their record.
No problem.
So, do you remember their record off by heart? 47 wins or 48 wins last season?
I think it was 47.
I'll look it up real quick.
No problem.
They won 48 last year.
Okay.
48. So, I think a lot of people, the view I'm seeing online is like, well, if they won 48 games last year, you have to pick them to win like upwards of 50 because they're going to obviously be better than last year. And I think that ignores a lot of critical things, such as the East, I think, has gotten a decent amount better, especially at the bottom. And even teams like Philadelphia got better. Cleveland's going to be better. Like Atlanta is going to be better. The Knicks are going to be better. I think a lot of teams are going to be better. So that's one thing. And it also ignores what I was just saying, where I think the Raptors had a lot of preferential games in terms of rest, in terms of guys not coming to Canada, where they were playing like the skeleton of teams. So the Raptors definitely did get better as the season went on, but part of it, like they didn't get that good where they were playing at like a 60-win pace for the second half of the season or whatever. Like, I don't think they're that good. So I'm going to go with like 50 wins, basically. I'm going to say the Raptors are going to win like 50 games. I guess that would mean they lose 32. And that sounds pessimistic, but I think it's just those things I just said. B, I don't see like Scottie making the all-star leap that everyone sees this year, maybe the next year, but I don't really see it this year in terms of like actually becoming named an all-star. And C, I think they're not going to care about the regular season as much. Like, they made an all-out push for the playoffs last year. That was all they cared about. So they played Fred extremely hard, played Pascal so hard, and I don't see them doing that this year. Like I think they'll be willing to lose a couple games in order to buy those guys some rest so that they care about the playoffs this season. Last season was all about, it really was like a rebuilding year, and they admitted that. This year they're going to win some playoff rounds, and so I don't think they're going to care about the regular season as much.
Did you just predict them winning multiple playoff rounds?
No, I said that's what they care about, like this
Okay.
year.
I said they're going
No,
to.
but I think their goal should be to win a playoff round.
I agree.
Like it might be a little disappointing depending on how everything matches up in injuries. If you don't win a playoff round this season, that's a bit disappointing.
I agree with everything you said. Um, it feels like across the league that everybody just kind of got better. Uh, and it's hard to point to teams that got worse. I think Charlotte is going. I think teams got worse by nature of doing nothing. So that's like Miami. That's Charlotte. That's
Yep.
I just had it on the tip of my tongue. The Chicago is another one that I think could.
But Chicago was so
step back.
injured, right?
Yeah, but I mean,
I
but they
don't know.
didn't. Yeah, that's true. But I think they overachieved a little bit. So I could see. I guess it does depend on Lonzo. Anyway,
I also think Detroit and Orlando, teams at the
better.
bottom, also I think got better.
I agree. Regardless, I hammered the over already on Toronto, and stay tuned. We're going to do over unders hopefully next week with the Italian chef Kyle. So we'll talk about that there. But for Toronto, I hammered
the over
is
easy. It's like 45.
It's 45 and a half.
Yeah.
And so I do think the window is 46 to 52 range. I don't think 50 is pessimistic. I think it's about right. There are some very good teams out there this year. There's going to be some games that we let slip just because I think there's more equality across the league. How many games? I'm going to say 49. I'm going to say 49.
Wow, you're a Raptors hater.
I do think that Toronto is in a better place this year because all of the players like last year, they put the ball in the hands of a lot of guys who weren't necessarily ready. And this year, Scottie being one of them at times, and him and Precious are going to be a bigger part of this offense. And I expect OG, like praying he's healthy, will also. And so even if we're going to take the ball out of Pascal and Freddie's hand more than last year, or put it in their hands less than last year, I don't think that's necessarily going to impact the overall offense because these other guys are going to be stepping up with more capability. I just think the East is going to be challenging, assuming KD stays put in Brooklyn.
Yeah, and the back of bench depth is also a lot better. Now I'm kind of talking myself into going to like 52.
Yeah. I
the
got
back of the
51.
bench depth I'd like a lot more with Boucher improving and Thad being there for a whole season and Otto Porter. I still think like Malachi and Delano are not really ready for the roles they're going to have to play. But other than that role, they have some pretty good depth. So yeah, I think they could totally surprise me and be like a 55 win team. Like I would not be shocked if that happened. But I just don't think we can automatically look at 48 last season and be like, oh, they're going to way surpass that.
Yeah, I almost regret choosing 49 now too. But you put me on the spot. Like I wasn't ready for this question, so I want to read.
Oh yeah, these aren't our. Don't worry, these aren't our.
I don't want it to be my official choice. Yeah,
we can do our official choice closer to the season.
But very quickly, because we're talking about the bench, and I was just talking about this with a friend. Is Gary coming off the bench or not? Because we were talking about his odds for Sixth Man of the Year, and it's I think he should. I advocated it a lot last year.
What are his odds right now? They must be good.
They're like 24 plus 2,400 or something.
I mean, I don't fucking know, but I hope so. Like that's the way I would go with it. I would start Precious and bring Gary off the bench. Yeah. I don't really care.
We don't have any
about the pushback that everyone says. Like, but what if Gary doesn't like? No, I hate the argument so much. That was the same argument for Norm Powell, which was like, but what if he plays better with the starters? Tough shit, man. Get better. Like this isn't. We're not here to cushion you, and like we're here to build something and see what we have and build something for the future. So we got to see like you got to be able to fit into any role as an NBA player. Like unless you're like so good at something that you have to build around something. You have to build around them. But like Gary is not, to me, enough of the part of the core where you have to build around him. So yeah, like if he's better with the starters, that's tough luck. I
He's
don't know.
also the perfect persona to be the sixth man. It's like, okay, Gary,
Yeah.
you get the ball. You're gonna play with a bunch of dudes who like to spot up and cut and do all of the grit work. You're gonna go score. That's all you have to do as the sixth man. And I feel like Gary would be like, okay, dope. Like I'm still gonna get 28 minutes a game. I'm down.
That's the other thing, is that from everything he said since becoming a Raptor, I don't think he would be like, no, I'm not coming off the bench. Like,
Right.
he seems to me like the type of guy who would be willing to do pretty much whatever as long as he's playing significant minutes.
And
so yeah,
bigger egos have accepted coming off the bench. So I don't think it's not preposterous. Anyway, it just popped in my head. It was an interesting topic.
anyway.
Anything else? Anything to plug?
No, not really. I just filed a story. Should be in the Toronto Star this weekend.
Whoa, good for you.
It's about baseball.
Ew, you traitor.
I traded, yeah. So
cool.
that should be interesting.
That's a big deal. Do you know anything about baseball?
No, it's not like about like, I'm not examining the game.
Yeah,
it's like a human interest story about baseball.
That's your angle.
So, but to answer your question, no, I don't know anything.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah. After you listen to this one, you can listen to me on Confederacy of Dunks that I was on yesterday. I don't know if you've hung out with those guys, but they're really fucking funny. And they're
but I was listening a bit today. I was watching on YouTube a bit.
Their editing's hilarious. Like that's something we got to work on, but we'll take that off air. And then other than that, we're going to do this hopefully next week, more gambling. We're not supporters of gambling, but I think talking about basketball in the context of gambling is interesting. So we're going to likely do that next week.
Yeah. Oh, I have also to plug that I'll be back writing at Raptors Republic about Canada basketball mostly.
Cool.
So in August, Canada men's team got a couple games I'll be writing about. And then in September, there's the AmeriCup and then the FIBA Women's World Cup. So I'll be covering all that stuff at Raptors Republic. If you're into Canada basketball, check it out there.
You're going to travel for those games?
No.
Not even Victoria?
Are you going to go to Argentina?
I'm not in town.
Yeah, no, it doesn't make sense. It's only one game in Victoria.
Yeah.
So definitely doesn't make sense to go there, but should be a good one.
All the tournaments, though, that'd be sick to travel to.
It would be sick, but I'm not gonna. Okay. I mean, RR doesn't have the budget. They're not.
I was just gonna say, get Zerard to foot the bill.
Yeah,
he'll send you on a Greyhound or something.
The FIBA World Cup is in Sydney, Australia. So I would Zerar, if you're listening.
Cargo ship.
Let's do it.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll catch you next week.